Aloha and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Got Your Six podcast. This six-question podcast brings together high performers to share their methods, strategies, and ideas, delivered in an informative and, most importantly, actionable way that'll help you lead yourself and those around you from the battlefield to the boardroom. Coming to you every episode, I'm your host, Tony Nash. And into the breach.
Nothing mentioned on this podcast is an endorsement or opinion of the Department of Defense.
I got your six, we got your back. Got your six, we got your back. Got your six, we got your back. I got your six.
Sixers, we have a fantastic episode today. Colonel Candice Frost is joining us, and the list is long, so I'm going to do my best to give it its due. Colonel Candice Frost is a United States Army veteran, senior intelligence executive entrepreneur and public speaker. She is an active duty military intelligence officer and the CEO of Colonel Candid, a firm that offers mentorship services and leadership programs. Definitely check that out. We're going to get more into that throughout the episode. Her mission is to mentor the world's future leaders in the intelligence and national security communities through public speaking engagements, broad-reaching written communications on leadership. She regularly shares the lessons she learned over the past 2 decades as a leader and provides insight on how to manage career as well as lead businesses. As the first woman in an infantry brigade, she stood out as only one of 4,000 paratroopers in the infamous 82nd Airborne Division. Her life story has been featured in the book Undaunted, the real story of American servicewomen to today's military. A single mother for nearly a decade, she gave practical advice on balancing motherhood and a national security and defense career. However, she is currently happily married and has a rock star tag team partner who is a fantastic stepfather to her children. She lives by the saying, be the change you wish to see in the world. She has been featured on several podcasts and national media outlets to include MSNBC. And she currently hosts her own podcast, Candid Conversations, where she interviews leaders from different industries on their experiences and best practices. She is a graduate from the United States Military Academy at West Point, class of 1998, where she was also part of the marathon team. She was commissioned in the United States Army, where she branched military intelligence. In her 2 decades of service, she's been deployed multiple times to Bosnia and Afghanistan. She also has her master's in public administration from Central Michigan, which I think, isn't that the woodchuck? No. Central Michigan, we'll get into that in a little bit. Central Michigan is where she got her MBA or master's in public administration and finished War College Fellowship for the CIA. Colonel Frost, ma'am, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Tony. It's great to be here. I am a super big fan of Got Your Six.
Oh, fantastic. We love to reach out to fellow Sixers, so this is great. I will remember by the end of this episode what the mascot is for Central Michigan. I almost want to say...
and this is the beauty of the military, I've never stood on their campus.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did almost all of it from Hawaii.
Wow. Man, that's, again, just to be able to balance. And again, it's never like an equal balance, and we're going to get into it. There's going to be some things that kind of get dropped, but continue to remain focused on your end state and your goal is something really, like, not a lot of people can say they do because it takes repetition, right?
Yeah, it does. Like anything in life, I love the surfing analogy. It's all about staying up on the board, and it takes a lot of balance.
Absolutely. So would you say throughout your military time, to include being a cadet, is there one thing that you've kind of implemented daily that has really been beneficial to allow you to, have that balance and stay on the board?
Absolutely. I think when I kind of look holistically at my career, where are those areas that I picked up from the very beginning and I've kind of continued to work with? And I think a big one of those for me is just, I have found the fact that you have to embrace being comfortable, being uncomfortable. It kind of is akin to the Eleanor Roosevelt quote that's been passed down through the ages, to do something that scares you every single day. So, when I got to school, I definitely was not your typical mold of a cadet. I didn't know that much about the military. And when I walked into this very regimented, very linear, finite, I was more of kind of artistic, go with the flow, kind of creative person. And it was very uncomfortable for me at first to have so many rules to live by and such a regimen. But I recognized that, that I could get used to it, and you could become comfortable with that different type of lifestyle. And
Sure.
so by doing that, I stepped out of my comfort zone, and I've recognized everywhere you go in life, the more you step out of your traditional kind of bubble of what makes you feel like you have a warm blanket around you and into the unknown, you're going to grow from that. And you when you embrace it, it's phenomenal. You can grow and do so many different things, but you have to take that first step.
Yeah, and literally taking the first step, you were on the marathon team at school, which is its own separate thing of like bracing for the suck that is on the other side of every race. So that had to play a part of that too, like you were saying.
Absolutely. And I think that, I joined the marathon team after the track team. There were some complete rock stars. And that's where you recognize in life, you know what? I am not that good. I think West Point does an amazing job of humbling you in so many different ways. And, whether it's doing the indoor obstacle course, which is like a gymnast's dream, but to the mortal man like myself, it was a great big challenge. And listeners out there that haven't had the fortune of going and touring West Point, when you do go there, or you do talk to any person who's graduated, just mention the letters IOCT and see the sweat beads just start to fall down their brow, because it's something that is just not normal. And when you can embrace that, just like when I embraced, hey, I think I'm going to go a little further distance and join the marathon team, it created a new element for me, really understanding, hey, you really can build grit from the start, and you can gain and grow and grow. And I've used that throughout my career.
And that's a fantastic point of like knowing where the wall is, because if you ever reach the wall, you're going to die. Like that's just how it is. That's if you reach, you've exhausted yourself. But being able to push that wall just a little bit further each time and coming so close and knowing that it kind of moves down the road. And like you said, increasing your grit, I think is something that we all kind of have to revisit on a daily basis. So that's a phenomenal takeaway for something to implement daily. Knowing West Point was such a huge impact on your life, is there another book or a course or, even like a YouTube video or TED Talk, something that you've come across that has really just been like this massive influence on your life? I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that.
So I always tell people when they ask me, like, what's your favorite book? I'm like, that's like, which is my favorite child? It's impossible.
Right.
Because I'm a complete bibliophile, but I would say there are a couple that I have read multiple times. One is recent and one is a classic. So I'll start with the classic literature, and I would say Steinbeck's book, The Pearl. Any person that understands history can also understand the fact that great literature exists for a reason, and it has a lasting shelf life because of the method and the messages it gives to people. And Steinbeck's book is so true when you read it, especially The Pearl, because when this family goes after kind of that financial win, or they have only, prosper through a means of material goods on their mind, they forget what's most important to them, and then that's family. And so I took that life lesson. I read that book. It's a smaller book, kind of like A Message to Garcia. Every intel officer has read that one. Mm-hmm. Both kind of small, but The Pearl is great in the fact that it gives you those wonderful life lessons of what do you most prioritize, and make sure you carry that with you throughout your life. The second one is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And she is just such a pistol. I have enjoyed that book. I've kind of listened to her speak, and I draw a lot of energy from people like her, especially in her field, that just constantly think over and over, hey, how can I adapt? How can I reinvent? And how can I make sure I grab the best talents of my entire workforce? So Radical Candor is always up on the top of my list.
You talked about two interesting points, both of family and then also looking to reinvent yourself, right? One thing, like, because family is like almost it is a constant, but you're always looking to grow and, over time and develop, because your kids grow and things like that. And you grow as a person. Has there been something, say a skill or ability that you've recently picked up that you're kind of like very new at, that you're trying out, talking that growth piece, Why maintaining, the family life? I really want to kind of dive into that.
So a skill that I've most recently kind of picked up and grown, I think it's because I was thrust into this with work in a good way, is really the understanding cyberspace. And what I do in my work now is that, I have a confluence of understanding the cyber domain. I have interest in looking at cryptocurrency and what are all of the threats. If you turn the news on, by the time this podcast is actually released, there will probably be another type of threat to the internet or the cyber world out there. And so then, the confluence of that being a political science major, and what does that mean with respect to our Constitution and privacy and all of these nodes together, crime, piracy. I've had to really roll up my sleeves and dive head first. And I think that's something that I've absolutely enjoyed. It's like learning a foreign language, but it just keeps my mind really agile. And I think those people, and that, especially those that listen to your podcast, I've spoken about it already once, get out of your comfort zone. But number two, do something with that, right? As you're building and learning and growing, use it in many different ways, because you'll be amazed at the connections of things that I did 20 years ago at the very beginning of my career when I was, Intel looking at Columbia. It's amazing how there are so many lessons from the drug trade that I can use now when I'm looking at different types of financial threats and the way the world in cyber weaves its web.
Yeah.
It's very similar, and I think it's really fascinating to be able through the years you can pull all these lessons together, and that's why, of course, people talk to you so much about reading and kind of combining the things that you've learned into what you're doing right now.
So how long until we see a Colonel Candid NFT somewhere on the marketplace?
I don't know, but yeah, I am all about understanding NFTs. I just want a wallet that will never get broken into.
Right.
So that's my thing. Until I can find I found the perfect man. If you can find the perfect man, you can find the perfect wallet. And I eventually will. And I'm sure some fintech person will reach out to me and sell me on their wares. But I do really enjoy, there's another side of me. I have multiple personalities, not really, but I do many different things.
Yeah.
And I do a lot in the academic realm. And I mentioned this to somebody about, aren't you threatened by cryptocurrencies and the fact that there is a potential possibility it could overtake the dollar? And they kind of laughed me down. And I said, all right, he who laughs last, be weary. Look out, world. So, those guys at Georgetown, it'll be fun.
Yeah. We will find out. And I think we both kind of are on the same page with that one going forward. So a lot has changed really,
Yes.
Throughout your career, especially in the last 5 years when it comes to the cyber domain, from a professional side, and then like in your personal life. Really, is there like a new behavior or belief that you've kind of taken away and like really reflected on and use that to kind of improve your life going forward?
Absolutely. And I think that's a wise question. Many of the people that you've had on your show are kind of at that, getting out of the starting blocks from college and those first couple of miles that you run. I'll use my marathon analogy again.
There we go. I was waiting for that.
And some of the people you've had on your show have been in the first couple of hurdles they've had to jump over with, marriage and first couple of careers and making their first or second pivot or transition. I'll say I'm a little bit longer in the tooth, and knowing that the habits and belief systems that I've used kind of in my transformational journey through life really stem from knowing my strengths and weaknesses. And so at the beginning of my professional journey, I was very forward leaning, a tad bit impatient, and a weakness of mine probably was in the fact that just granting other people forgiveness and making sure that I understood where they were coming from in their situation. Fast forward now 2 decades, and I think one thing and a belief that has changed over my career, regardless of the multitude of different jobs I've had, whether it's in academia, that realm of myself, whether it's in the spiritual realm of myself, whether it's in the entrepreneurial, or even whether it's in the military side. I wear many different hats, but I do know one thing that I have learned over years, and that is granting people just grace. Giving people the ability to understand that not everything needs to be done right now, right here. There are moments where you absolutely have to roll up your sleeves, but separating the important from the urgent, that has absolutely come to me in many different measures. I've learned many lessons from that. And then understanding and letting people know, hey, this is good. This is who I am. There are parts of me that change, but I oftentimes have really strong beliefs, weakly held. So I can be talked off of an idea with sound logic and reasoning, but I will hold on to it very strongly and back that up until my mind can be changed. And here I am talking to you, by the way, from Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. So I may be the only person on this block that holds that ability to change my mind and not suffer repercussions or have to take a poll to do that. Logic is very strong in this house. But it is fascinating to kind of understand that when you grant grace to other people and accept and see where they're coming from, your world really opens up in many different ways.
And that's such timely advice, especially, granted over your career, you've come to that, but really even in the last year where life has been uprooted for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And just having that grace and being like, somebody shows up late to a meeting, it's like, hey, it's okay, take a breath. Like, we're going to get started. This is how life is rolling right now, as opposed to being like, you're not here, what's wrong with you? Like, you're putting it back on the person, because there's going to come a time where you're going to need somebody to show you a little bit of grace. So that's just such a powerful message.
Absolutely. And you're thankful to the people that have. I've had so many people in my career, kind of going back to that person or, podcast or book you talk about. There have been so many mentors I've had that have granted me that grace, and sometimes I just didn't even recognize it. And it was a true blessing.
Yeah. The greatest grace is the one you don't realize until down the road. And you're like, oh my goodness, that person was just so kind and thoughtful. And you're like, how did I miss that? It was right in front of my face. So you have had you were having a long career in the military and in the national defense sector. You're going to have a lot of wins, and at the end of each episode, we talk about stacking wins. We'll get into that in a little bit, but you've also probably had some failures. Where you've learned and grown from those. Is there a specific failure that has ultimately led to a great success or your greatest success?
Absolutely. And this is one I think some of your listeners will appreciate, having probably gone through this or understand that the people that they've been around have. And my biggest failure that led to my greatest success was probably my divorce, because it led to a real second chance. When you go through that monumental event of divorce, you have to do a lot of self-reflection. I've talked about that a little bit, but you have to do self-reflection on kind of who you are and what you want with your life. And, you can go down the economic most prosperous through money sector. You can go down the just the greatest number of thrills sector, or you can go down a kind of road that I went down after my divorce, and saying that I really want a life partner that wants to be with me for the rest of my life. So it helped me reset. It helped me understand what my priorities were. That failure and recognition that especially my ex-husband had post-traumatic stress disorder, and that so many of us in the military, we think we can personally fix everything ourselves. We can fix this or that or another person. That's really hard to do. And so if you've got a friend, if you've got someone else in your life or your circle that that's going through a really tough emotional mental disorder, getting them help is incredibly important, but also knowing that it's their decision to kind of walk their own journey. That was something that I learned, and was able in the end to get to one of the greatest successes that I have, which is my awesome partner in crime now, who is keeping everyone at bay as we record this podcast. Keeping people quiet is always fun. So I'm very thankful to him for that. But it also helped me recognize what's most important in life. And man, the family unit, it's incredibly important. And when things shake and rattle, At the end of the day, it's those people that kind of stand around your headstone and hopefully tell great stories about you that are going to make a difference in life.
That is a great point, right? Of not only the family unit being, again, like we talked about, that constant, like work changes, things happen, but taking the time to have what we would say like a tactical pause, like, or like, and reflect where we're at, tactical patience, looking around kind of your environment, seeing what's going on, taking it all, and then continuing to move forward. Because to a lot of people, like that's kind of the end. They're like, oh, like what now? And you were like, something's got to happen. Like we got to keep moving forward because I'm not staying here in this position.
Exactly. And, I have a new appreciation, especially for generationally. I think, there are some big areas that have changed so much that those of us who are in our middle years in our career versus those who are just starting out,
right.
Those of us in the middle, when we dated, it was much different than people are that are entering that field now. And I share that with a lot of my peers, like, you have no idea what it's like to be online dating. Yeah. Let me tell you about this crazy new world. And then the same thing with like the cost of college. Why are people complaining? Oh, that's right. Now that I'm checking it out for my kids, it is significantly different. So if you can understand and walk in someone else's shoes, man, you're a much better leader. You're a much better person overall because you can have empathy with kind of what they're going through.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we talked about walking in somebody else's shoes. Let's walk in your shoes for a second. How do you, ma'am, realize or recognize that you're better than yesterday?
So that's a really interesting question, and kind of thinking about that throughout my day today. How I do it is I'm really a truly lifelong learner. And so how I can be a better person than I was yesterday, especially a better leader and a better business owner, better at all of the different things that I do, is I try to get at least 30 minutes or an hour in every day, either research or some kind of reading. It's got to be something in the written word to kind of advance my skills. And whether that's, looking at how you better invest in the future with your business or where you can, gain more insights, especially with the military world that I'm in right now. I do a tremendous amount of reading as I'm diving into this new skill in this new world and cyber, but also it's just making sure that you kind of look at every single day, hey, what am I learning? What am I doing to advance myself mentally so that I can be prepared for kind of what's next? I am always hesitant, and especially when I kind of look to my left and my right, people that are very comfortable where they're at, I worry for that because our world is so rapidly changing that if you're not constantly trying to learn something new, it always doesn't have to be a new skill. It just has to be a new way to relate and grow and figure out, hey, this may be applicable to what I'm doing now, but it have long-term applications of creative thinking, obviously creative and critical thinking, but just drawing different inferences together. And that's kind of what I like to do. I like to connect the dots between things.
Connecting the dots so complacency doesn't set in. Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. So we kind of talked about, the podcast that you have, Candid Conversations with Colonel Candid herself. Where can people reach out to you? Where are you most active? How can people get to know more about you?
Yeah, thanks. Well, you can definitely download my podcast. It's called Candid Leadership. It's wherever you find yourself. After checking this great podcast out, you can go there and subscribe to Candid Leadership. I'm kicking off season 3. I am pretty prolific on LinkedIn. So Candice Frost, Frost. You can find me there. And I am every now and again on Twitter, Instagram, and my business is on Facebook as well. I do a substantial amount of paid public speaking, just trying to advance, especially the voices of women in national security and leadership. And I'm kicking it around old cybercom. So if we run into each other around the halls, please give me a hat tip.
Ma'am, thank you so much for your time, Thank you for your insight. And most importantly, thank you for having our six.
Thank you very much for having me. Take care.
I don't know what you've been told, Sixers, but the lawyers would like us to remind you that the views, opinions, and comments expressed on the Got Your Six podcast are solely those of the hosts or guests, to include current and previous Department of Defense employees, and should in no way be considered the opinions of or endorsements on behalf of the Department of Defense or any of its components, divisions, contractors, or other current and previous staff members.